From WKNOW, this is Steve Chanley with One Question Too Many. Today's program is made possible by the law firm of Employer Advocates Group, serving California employers since 2002, with offices in Orange County and San Luis Obispo County, California. eaglawgroup.com. We are joined today by Will Thompson, who is currently the Dean of Students at the Appalachian School of Law, where he also holds the position of visiting professor. He is a former circuit court judge in West Virginia and a former United States attorney in charge of the Southern District of West Virginia. On top of that, he currently still practices law as of counsel with a law firm. Thanks for joining us today, Will.
Thanks for having me on.
How long have you been practicing law?
This year marks the 30th year.
Are you from West Virginia originally?
I am a ninth generation West Virginian. My forefathers and four grandmothers were here before West Virginia became a state.
Wow, that's impressive.
And they were all named William Thompson. I'm like the 8th William Thompson in a row, and my son is the 9th.
Well, that must be confusing during family gatherings.
We all have different middle initials, so that helps.
I studied your background a bit, which has included just about every role that an attorney can have. But I'd really like to begin with your current academic role. Is this your first foray into being a legal educator?
It's my first foray into being one full-time. I have spoken at law schools in the past more as a guest lecturer coming in for a 1 or 2 hour event. But this is my first time making it a full-time position.
What drew you to becoming a law professor after having been a judge and a high-level federal prosecutor?
I was searching after leaving my role as U.S. attorney for what to do next. I wanted to do something that did involve some type of public service, because that's basically what I've done for the last 20 plus years. And I wanted to do something that was exciting. I come from a family of educators. Going back to my grandmother, they had all taught in the local school system. I'm the only member of my immediate family that never drew a paycheck from our local school system. So going into education was naturally a next step for me. I like working with young people. I like working with young lawyers. So I thought this would be a great opportunity to try.
When does the next school year begin?
We have orientation on August the 4th. Appalachian does orientation a little bit different than a lot of law schools. We were having the students come, or the 1L students come down for 2 weeks before the school starts, basically give them a boot camp of law school. We're going to teach them how to brief a case, how to read a case. One thing I like about it and appreciate about the school is we actually start bar prep during the orientation. They'll take a mini bar just to give them an idea of where they stand. So we start orientation there, and then the actual school begins 2 weeks later.
Boy, I can tell you, I could have certainly benefited from a program like that.
I remember before I started law school, there was not a lot of material. And this was, of course, mostly pre-internet days. So I remember I read, I'm sure most law students did in that day, 1L by Scott Turow. There were some other books I remember getting, but there's not a lot of information of what to expect your first day. I like the fact that we're actually giving students, this is what we expect of you. This is how you read a case. This is how you brief a case. Sort of gives them a leg up on, so when they actually do start the classes, they can pay attention to material rather than trying to figure out how to process the material.
Which courses will you be teaching?
The first semester I'm teaching appellate advocacy. Second semester, I'm going to teach criminal law. And my daughter is actually a student there. So I'm also going to teach constitutional law, but she takes it this year. So I'm going to stand on the sidelines while she takes it.
Well, that must be interesting having your daughter there.
It is. She is the one who actually made me aware of the position being open. Actually, what she did, she told me that the constitutional law professor was retiring. She knows I have a keen interest in constitutional law. And she says, you ought to talk to the dean, who I had met previously, about coming down here and teaching. And I went down there and talked to him and says, well, I've got a different role for you. Why don't you come down here and be dean of students? And he talked me into it, and I'm going to Appalachian School of Law this fall.
How do you prepare for teaching at law school for the first time? Do you have a specific methodology?
One thing that helped was the other faculty at the law school has been very welcoming of me. They shared their course outlines with me. The person who taught appellate ad, I'm teaching the criminal section of appellate ad, shared actually all his classroom slides with me from last year. So that's helped. I've talked to many different faculty, and I plan on talking to many more. Now, I am going to be doing this sort of a trial by fire. I feel pretty comfortable teaching appellate advocacy because, especially as my role as a judge, didn't really sit as an appellate judge that much. I did on occasion, but I was used to reading briefs and making decisions. So I think I have a lot to add for that class. But I'm probably going to be learning just as much as the students, especially my first time through.
In what ways do you think that law students today might be different from law students of, say, a generation ago?
One thing I'm concerned, and I speak this as a father of 4 children, is attention span. I think the internet's brought a lot of great things to our life. It's also brought a lot of bad things. And I think our attention span, our ability to read long passages has suffered because of the social media generation. So I think that's going to be a significant difference. I think I'm going to have to teach the class in 2 to 3 minute blurbs and then have discussions as opposed to a 45-minute lecture and then have a discussion.
I was going to ask you whether you're going to somehow adapt your teaching methods to a way that would enhance reaching your students.
I have thought along those lines. And like I said, it's going to be a work in process. But I think keep it short, keep it engaged. One of the things I really liked about law school, even back in the same age as when I went, was the engagement you had with professors. Even if you were not the person on the hot seat, you felt for the person on the hot seat. And it really was a discussion as opposed to someone just sitting up there telling you a bunch of legal doctrines and theories and you taking notes and then you regurgitate it on a test. I like the fact there was, through the Socratic method, there was always some type of engagement. And I think that might actually serve this generation of law students pretty well.
The Socratic method as a pedagogical tool is misused in the wrong hands, I've found. I can speak only from my personal experience at law school. I was terrified when I was asked something by the professor, and it wasn't used necessarily as a means of promoting a dialogue so much as a means of humiliating me as a student. That was my thinking.
I remember my first 2 weeks of law school asking myself, why am I putting myself through this? I had my undergraduate degree was in civil engineering. I'd actually worked as a civil engineer for the summer between undergrad and law school. And I'm like, I could have stayed there and probably made as much money as I'm going to make as a first year law grad. But here I am, I'm going to deal with professors who are going to humiliate you on a daily basis. Now, you've developed a tougher skin, and then you realize some of the professors were doing that as a way to better prepare you. I remember the professor I was probably most intimidated by my first 2 weeks was the professor I ended up enjoying the most and took him for every class he had.
What advice would you give to a young person today who's thinking about going to law school?
My advice, I've given this advice to a lot of people over the years. A lot of people came to me and asked, should I go to law school? What should I do? The first is undergraduate major. Mine was atypical. For some reason, I went the civil engineering route, mainly because my father told me, I don't want you to get a business degree or a history degree because all you'll be qualified to do after that is sell refrigerators at Sears. So you need to do a degree that you're going to actually have a job at. I knew I was going to law school at the time. I wish I would have majored in something like philosophy or something of that nature because I think it would have helped me better prepare the logic behind it. I would encourage people who are thinking about law school to do something with their undergraduate degree that will help them prepare, whether it be English. Obviously that helps with your writing. I love the philosophy classes I took in undergrad. I wish I would have taken more of those. I think that would have helped me better prepare for law school. Political science, I know that's a traditional route. I think that is a good preparation for law school. You just better be prepared to go to law school if you do major in that.
Would you have given the same advice, say, 20 years ago?
I think so. I have given the same advice 20 years. I used to stress to people they should take philosophy because I think that was the best undergraduate major. I took 2 philosophy classes as an undergrad. And like I said, I wish I would have taken 4 or 6 more. Would have given the same advice. I would also tell them, make sure this is a profession that you enjoy, a job that you will like, because if you don't like it, it's a miserable existence. The school's tough. The school's not easy. I would equate the school, I've called it many times, especially your first year, as a mental boot camp. You need to be prepared for it. But if you are prepared for it and it's something you want to do, it's certainly been a very rewarding career for myself.
Do you believe that the practice of law is currently much different than it was 20 years ago?
It's incredibly different than it was 20 years ago. And I think it's going to be incredibly different 5 years from now, 10 years from now. You're seeing the advent of technology, the advent of artificial intelligence. If used in the right hands and used properly, it's going to make lawyers much more effective. It's going to make their work product much better. Now, if you try to use it to create shortcuts, you're going to create a lot of problems for yourself. I saw a few times as a judge where people would get sloppy, not so much with artificial intelligence, but with some of their technology. They weren't prepared and they expected the technology to be perfect. But I do think the practice of law is ever changing. And that's one of the reasons I wanted to go into the academic world, because I sort of want to be one of the leaders of that change. I want to prepare the next generation of lawyers for, hey, what I did is certainly much different than what people did who graduated in the 1960s and 70s. And your career is going to be much different than mine, but you need to go into it with an open mind, one who's adapted to change. And I think it's going to continue to be an exciting profession and career.
Does your law school provide any technical support or have classes specifically on the new emerging technologies?
We do. The actual dean of the school comes from the military. His name's David Western. He did a lot with writing some policies with respect to outer space law. So we are pretty adaptive. We do have some courses where we incorporate artificial intelligence into them, how to use them. Actually, with my appellate ad, I am not allowing the use of artificial intelligence, at least for the writing of the first brief, because I want to make sure they can put words on paper themselves and not type a prompt into a computer. But we are recognizing that the legal profession is changing, and we're trying to be on the forefront of it.
Do you think most law schools today place enough emphasis on practical aspects of practicing law, such as running a practice, bringing in clients, and working with clients?
I don't. That's one of the reasons I was sort of drawn to my current spot at the Appalachian School of Law. I hired several graduates from there, both as a judge and as a U.S. attorney for clerks and AUSA positions. And they have always put an emphasis on making practice-ready lawyers. I have seen a lot of lawyers graduate from law school who are not practice-ready, who might understand the law incredibly well, but did not know how to put that information to use in a practice, building a law practice, how to argue in front of a judge, how to relate to a client. And that is something I think a lot of law schools could do a better job than what they're currently doing.
Do you know whether the ABA mandates any type of practical curriculum in order to be accredited?
They are, and they're actually increasing the amount of they're basing on hours in school, but the percentage of your educations, I think they're going to up it to 12 hours. And I might be wrong on that, but they are increasing. They're realizing there's a need to increase practice-ready lawyers, and the ABA is doing, I don't know if it takes an effect this year or in a couple of years, but they are addressing that issue, which I think is a great thing.
One of the things that you'll be doing at Appalachian Law School is establishing a mentorship program for students being paired with alumni and other practitioners. Can you tell us about that?
What we're doing is essentially making sure the lawyers have someone to call, the phone a friend, or I guess now it's more of a text a friend. But people they can relate to, they can ask questions. I think mentors are very important in the development of a practicing lawyer. I, as a U.S. attorney, we had a very strong mentorship program, and we did it in such a way where they were not necessarily, or they couldn't be the supervisor of the attorney, because we wanted the person to be able to go to them and ask what they might think was a silly question or something of that nature, or a question they don't want to admit they don't know the answer to. So that's part of the reasons we're doing the mentorship. And also, practice of law is tough. We want them to have someone they can rely on when they've got an issue or they've got a question. And it could be something totally unrelated to the law. I've been doing this long enough that I've seen lawyers develop dependency problems, things of that nature. We want them to have a mentor to, number one, hopefully prevent that from happening. And number two, if it does happen, someone they can turn to and ask for help.
More law schools attempting to be more proactive in establishing or promoting mentorships for their students and graduates?
It's my understanding that is a current trend among law schools.
I applaud that. How hard is it to get practicing attorneys to agree to be mentors to law students or recent graduates?
It depends on who's asking and who's being asked. Some people love it. Some people will jump at the chance to do it. And those, of course, are the people who are asking. And sometimes they bear the burden because not everybody wants to help people. Not everybody wants the middle of the afternoon phone call. How do I file this brief? Or what does this judge do if I miss a deadline? But a lot of people embrace it. It's pretty, how can I say, special. Everybody I have called thus far, and like I said, I know a lot of the people in the area, of asking them to come and help. They've all jumped at the chance. I think lawyers as a whole take a leadership role within society, and they like to be able to teach and help other people in the profession. And that's not true of everyone, but there's a large percentage of us who do.
Personally, had mentors who played a role in your own development?
I was very, very fortunate. When I graduated law school, I was able to go back to my hometown to practice at a small, it was a father and son firm. And the father had sat on a circuit court bench for about 12 years. And I did everything he didn't want to do. And he was a great mentor. Basically, had the ability to ask a former judge, can I do this or should I do this? And his name was Jerry Cook. He's still with us, which is great. He was a great mentor, pointing me in the right direction, but also gave me enough rope to learn. I mean, he didn't micromanage me by any stretch of the imagination, turned me loose, but was always there to answer the questions I had. And that's the type of mentor I would like to see everyone.
Let's talk a little bit about your current private practice. You remain as an of-counsel attorney at a law firm in addition to your role as a law professor and a dean of students. Can you tell us about that?
Yes, I'm counsel to Spillman, Thomas, and Battle. It's a rather large firm for West Virginia. It's headquartered in West Virginia, but it has locations in Pennsylvania, Virginia, and North Carolina, and Florida. We have one office in Florida. And my role there is what I would call a problem-solving role. I'm going to use some of my background as a ADR, doing mediation, some arbitrations, but also to do problem solving, to disentangle people from certain issues they might have. I do have a pretty extensive experience in a wide variety of areas of the law, and some, whether it be government relations, whether it be practicing before an administrative agency or a litigation question or what a particular judge likes to do or not do. I'm sort of the go-to person for questions such as that.
I like the concept of how that could dovetail very nicely with your role as a legal educator, being very practical in solving problems and possibly even explaining to attorneys, students in your class, how they will ultimately develop skills to be able to free people from their legal issues and their entanglements.
I think one thing that I want to teach not only law students, but also members of this firm is that litigation is not always the answer. Sometimes picking up a phone and seeing if we can get a situation resolved is a better solution for your client. I love to litigate. I mean, I've spent my entire career in courtrooms, very comfortable in courtrooms, but also I realize litigation is very slow. It's very expensive, and it doesn't always get the best result. So trying to educate the students and also lawyers, and perhaps more importantly in the private practice, clients, this is the best solution. Yes, we can go win this matter, but a phone call of let's fix this situation before we have to litigate it might serve us better in the end.
What's After being in private practice for many years, you were appointed to the bench as a circuit judge in West Virginia. Is that the trial court system in West Virginia?
Yes, I was a trial court judge of general jurisdiction.
How much of a transition was it to go from private practice to the bench?
Obviously was a transition, but it was one I felt pretty well suited for because I was a litigator. I was in that particular courtroom probably 3 or 4 days out of 5 every week. When I first started practicing law, we did not have a public defender. And youngest lawyer in town generally becomes the de facto public defender. So I got thrown to the wolves pretty quickly. So I felt comfortable in the courtroom. Now, obviously, being a judge is a much different role than being an advocate. I actually found it to be a little harder transition, not going from an advocate to a judge, but going from a judge to a U.S. attorney because I had to take a role as an advocate once again. So there is some transition. There's a different way of thinking when you are representing people versus where you're trying to make the right decision based on the facts and law. So there is an adjustment period.
Well, let's talk about that a little bit. In 2021, you were sworn in as the United States Attorney for the Southern District of West Virginia. Can you tell our listeners what a United States Attorney who's in charge of federal law enforcement for an entire federal judicial district does on a day-to-day basis?
Typically, the U.S. attorneys are referred to as a chief law enforcement officer in the district. And that's pretty true. Basically, as I would tell people, I get to tell the FBI what to do, which is a pretty cool job to have. Now, I didn't tell the FBI what to do. We worked hand in hand and had a great relationship with them. But basically, you coordinate the federal prosecutions, the federal criminal investigations through your own work and through the work of your assistant United States attorneys, and decide what cases to prosecute, what priorities you want to have for an office. Now, there's another role of a U.S. attorney there's many roles of a U.S. attorney, but there's one role that people don't pay a lot of attention to, is we also represent the United States in all of its civil litigation. And that could be where the United States is instituting a civil action against someone, such as an enforcement action, or where someone is suing the United States and we are representing the United States on that. My background as a judge, obviously I enjoyed the criminal prosecution part of it. I mean, that was fun. But given my background as a judge, I also enjoyed the civil side of the office and managing the litigation that came from there. And like what type of cases, some cases you don't get to pick. If the United States gets sued, we represent them. But some of the enforcement actions, I really appreciated that. Also represented some frustrations. There were some things I would have liked to have done that required approval from Main Justice in D.C. that we didn't get to do. And I won't talk too much about that, but that was a frustrating part of the job. You also are managing the office. My office had 35 lawyers working in it across 3 different locations. So you're basically the head of probably for West Virginia, a medium to large law firm.
Were the responsibilities of leading such a large group of people what you'd expected it to be?
Yes. Anytime you're managing 35 lawyers and I think I had 41 support staff, and that's just direct employees of me, plus all the federal agencies, you're dealing with a lot. You're dealing with a lot of, human resources issues that pop up. You're dealing with something as trivial as somebody went to another person's office and changed their printing station because they were tired of them hogging the printer, to we had some budget issues and things of that nature. So it's a lot. I mean, there's a significant amount of just daily operations for an organization that size, and an organization that size that has a lot of rules. I think the only organization in the world that has more rules than the Department of Justice is probably the United States military.
While you were the United States Attorney in the Southern District of West Virginia, your district became the national leader in prosecuting fraud cases. Was there an initiative that you implemented that focused on bankruptcy fraud?
There was an initiative I instituted where I wanted to do more work with respect to what I call white-collar crime on paper. And don't get me wrong, we prosecuted a ton of drug cases, gun cases, crime-type cases. But I also wanted to be known as the U.S. attorney who would also prosecute the people who were, how can I say it, members of country clubs and things of that nature, who were stealing money through different methods. Had a wonderful relationship with our bankruptcy trustee, our bankruptcy judge. I had two young AUSAs who I had hired who really took an interest in it, in cases that had maybe languished before or were ignored before. I said, let's take a look at them and see what we can do. And we were finding that there was a significant number of people who were trying to cheat the system through bankruptcy fraud, trying to hide assets, and we prosecuted those.
You also successfully prosecuted several other notable cases. One of them involved the conviction of 8 prison guards for murder. Can you tell us about that case?
That was probably my most important case, and is the case that will stand out. This was a case where a inmate at a local jail facility named Quantez Burks was beaten to death one night. There was no real reason or justification for it. It was a very gruesome video to watch. It was a very gruesome case to prosecute. And it struck home with me, especially as my role as a judge and also as U.S. attorney. I'm responsible for a lot of people being in jail. And I used to feel very comfortable telling family members of someone who I was putting in jail that the person is safe there. West Virginia was the hotbed of the opioid epidemic. I put a lot of people in jail, and also got a lot of people treatment who suffered from opioid addiction. Sometimes you had to put them in jail to protect them from themselves before we could get them into treatment. But the fact that I can no longer tell people that their loved one is safer in jail than they would be on the streets really bothered me. We took a very aggressive stance in this case, ultimately successful. We had one of the 8 who decided to go to trial, convicted him, there was 2 who came in initially that helped, 2 more who came in after the indictments, and then 3, once they realized what the evidence we had, they came in and entered pleas. And then the 4th and the final one went to trial. But I think as a society, we have a duty to protect people that we incarcerate. I think we need to make sure they're safer there than they would be on the street. And in this case, the person wasn't. And there was no reason for this. This was not a fight that got out of hand or anything of that nature. This was a guy who was probably having a medical episode, get beat to death because somebody's feelings were hurt.
You also successfully prosecuted several law enforcement officers for human trafficking and sexual exploitation crimes against children. Do you find it hard to comprehend how individuals who have the authority and responsibility for enforcing the law and to protect the public can commit crimes of that nature?
I found it actually disgusting. I come from a family of law enforcement. The first 2 sheriffs of the county I grew up in were named William Thompson, were my forefathers. My uncles, first cousins, everybody, they've been state troopers, county sheriffs. So when we would have a picnic growing up, there would be a lot of law enforcement officers there, and I respect them, and I was brought up that you respect law enforcement, that when a person puts on a uniform and a badge, that they're serving their community, and that you should respect that. And I will also like to point out, I have a lot of friends who are in law enforcement, and I would get the equivalents of high fives from law enforcement members quite a bit when they knew that we were prosecuting these people, because they don't want to be associated with these people either. I actually tried one of the cases myself. Number 1, it was fun to do, to get back in the courtroom and be an advocate. Number 2, I wanted it to show that this is how serious we take these cases.
Your office also prosecuted several high-profile white-collar cases. Can you tell us about that?
Like I said, what was one of my initiatives coming in was to do more of the white-collar type. We did several of those. The internet fraud happens every day. It happened to me a week ago where someone tried to impersonate an email and tried to take advantage of me, which I had some fun with that. On some type of internet scam, we had businesses that were constantly getting scanned by some type of phishing attempt or something of that nature. So we made it a priority. We wanted to do what we could, not only to prosecute the cases that we had, and we were able to successfully prosecute several of those. We even were able to prosecute some transnational. We had some grad students here from out of the country we were able to prosecute. I would have liked to have got the person back in Ghana who was actually doing this. But unfortunately, we didn't, but we were able to prosecute some of their boots on the ground. They had as grad students here. And another thing I did on this one was I took a pretty heavy initiative in doing some public outreach of letting people know. Not only we had elder fraud where people were trying to scam our elderly, we had romance fraud. We had a lot of that. We had a pretty good case on that. And one that really bothered me, and we didn't get a really good case to prosecute on it, but I did a lot of public awareness on it. There is a lot of fraud going on with our young people now that's led to some unfortunate suicides and things of that nature. And I wanted to make the public aware of it, that it does exist. If anybody ever tells you you need to pay for something with a gift card, I can promise you that's a scam. If anyone ever tells you you need to make a deposit in some type of cryptocurrency, I can promise you that's a scam. So we did as much public awareness on those issues as well.
Do you participate in any pro bono or charitable activities?
Not so much what I would call pro bono. Mainly because, except for recently, I've been in positions where I could not do pro bono work. And I do a lot of charitable work. I don't do so much where I get necessarily public credit for, but my wife especially pays attention to children and families who are in need. And there's a lot of times we will drop things off where we don't ask for any credit or give any type of recognition. It's just we're making sure a child has something they need that night. I have paid for many Little League basketball at the sign-ups, drop things off to school to make sure that no child will be left not being able to do something just for a lack of resources.
Is that something that you emphasize with your students, or that you will emphasize?
I'm going to emphasize it with the students, and I will tell you, once again, this is where I think the Appalachian School of Law is ahead of the curve. We require all the students to do community service as part of their curriculum, whether it be they had a couple floods in the area last year. So we had students out doing flood relief. I know my daughter went out and participated in flood relief last year. We ask our students, we want them to think about they're going to be recognized as a leader in the community just simply by being a lawyer. We want you to give back to your community even before you become a lawyer. I think it's an important thing. I think it's something that lawyers should take upon themselves to do. I do recognize lawyers as leaders. I mean, I found that early on when I went back home, essentially to practice law. I found out if I was a member of anything, I essentially became the president of or something almost immediately just because, well, he's a lawyer. He must know how to do something. I don't know if that was right or not, but it did give me some wonderful experience. And it's something that should be expected. You know, and I'm not saying that you have to go represent your Little League or Girl Scouts or something in some type of legal capacity, but you can be a leader there. And I think people will respect you as a lawyer, and they're also going to expect it of you as a lawyer.
Have you ever asked that one question too many?
I think anybody who's ever litigated anything has always asked that one question too many. I had one that really stood out to me. And the stakes were pretty low. It was a misdemeanor case. But let's just say I had a law enforcement officer who was engaging in a lot of misremembering facts. And I knew he was misremembering facts, and I was having some fun with him. And I asked one question too many, and he corrected himself. So that's taught me a very valuable lesson. Once I make my point, I don't need to ask that next question.
Can you tell our listeners the best way of getting a hold of you?
Yes. There's two ways. On a law school question, I've got an email. It should be pretty easy to remember. It's Thompson, THOMPSON @ASL.edu. Now, if you have a question more related to my private practice of law, the email address there is getThompson@spillmanlaw.com, and Spillman is spelled SPILMAN. And I look forward to answering any questions. I get excited. I'm still the person that gets excited when they get an email.
Will, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thanks for having me on.